Hi everybody, this is Brian Koo with another ROK video. In Rise of Kingdoms, there are two ways of winning a war. One way is to zero your opponent's army. You drain them of all of their resources, speed-ups, and troops so they can no longer fight. The other way of winning is to win the objective-based fights that give you control of key parts of the map. So in some cases you may win a certain zone that allows you to lock out one of your enemies so they cannot participate in later parts of the war. Or you might win the majority of Zone 6s so that you have the majority of entrances into Kingsland, which gives you the advantage you need to win the war in KL. Now, what we're looking at right now is one of the later days of the Zone 6 fight that we had with 1682 in a recent Strife of the Eight that I'm calling the Drama War. And this video is going to be a transition from the first chapter of that war, in which we fight 1 versus 2 in Zone 6 and ultimately lose that zone, to the second chapter of that war, in which we try to secure an entrance to Kingsland, while our allies win in other parts of the map. And what is going to happen in this second chapter of the Drama War is that there's going to be a debate about what type of war we fought and which kingdom was the more valuable, higher contributing member of the winning team. Because one ally is going to do the majority of the damage to the enemy, whereas another ally is going to win key zones and win the majority of the territory that will potentially win the KvK due to territorial advantages. And so what I'm going to do now, because this was a debate essentially between our kingdom 1770 and our allies 1871. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to night 1 of this war, and I'm going to share the voice chat of me observing 1871 fighting, and you're going to see how I assess their performance against one of our enemies.
871 looks alright. They look like they're doing okay. I mean, seems like they have the field right now. Oh, maybe 82 down here is beating them. I see. Okay, so 82 is pretty good. This is FC. Is this the alliance that like didn't have that many kill points? Is this the alliance that had like 68 million kill points or 68 billion kill points? The 1682, yeah, Falcons. Yeah, so it's like 871 should like just not be losing to these guys. Like literally 871 had almost 4 times as many kill points as these guys, like before the fighting started and people started, switching alliances. Like, that's I mean, come on. 4 times more kill points and you're letting them push you on your uptime? Now granted, 871's fighting in a couple spots, but 871 just like doesn't rain enough. Like whenever I'm watching them, like the shit's getting swarmed and like people aren't filling.
So I think that was a very honest, unfiltered assessment from someone, me, who was fully rooting for 871 in that moment. I mean, this was night one of the war, and this was a moment where I was realizing that 1682 plus Water Camp was a very tough opponent for us in Passaran. And so I was looking around the map. I was at this moment in the war where I'm looking for good news. I'm looking for a light at the end of the tunnel where we can conceivably win this war. And so I'm scrolling around. I'm looking to see what our strongest ally is doing in Batafo. I first see them controlling part of the zone against Day Camp, which ultimately is just a very, very weak opponent. And I'm happy about that. But then I scroll around a little bit more and see that they are losing to the number 2 alliance from 1682. And I have a different assessment. I have an assessment of like, why are you losing to this group during your uptime? And so, you know, this war had a lot of moving parts. And as we look back on Passaran now and assess why it is that we lost this zone, I will first point out that the war in Passaran lasted for 5 days. It was a very long war. It was a back and forth war. In this footage we're looking at here, you can see that we have dropped forts near the enemy passes. 1682 has put forts in front of their passes to block us from reaching the pass and breaking into their safe zone. And there were times in this battle that we put extreme pressure on 1682 and had a real decent chance of disconnecting significant portions of their territory. Our uptime, our Korean uptime, we always made progress. And then in the European time zone, they made plenty of progress. And as this war went on, the scene we're looking at now, where 1682 has one of our flags surrounded and is getting ready to swarm and burn this flag, this became a more and more frequent sight, a more frequent scene during these European uptime periods. And really what happened is that our alliance, the Handsome Devils, we got worn out in this zone. And so then when the Koreans went to sleep, we were just not able to defend well against 1682. And it's tough for me to look back on some of this footage because I just see so many mistakes that get made by our side. Our efficiency on offense is not as good as it could have been. And there are all these moments where we get very close to disconnecting a key 1682 flag, but we're just unable to get that final burn, and they manage to hold. And then inevitably, I end up going to sleep, and I would wake up the next day, and an absolute ton of territory that we had taken the night before is all gone, and we've lost ground. And this sort of cycle repeated itself for 3 or 4 days. It was a very high variance zone, but ultimately we did get pushed out of Passaran. And the key factor in 1682 winning is that their number 2 alliance, the Falcons, they came over to this zone to help win this war. Our opponents decided for a number of reasons that Passaran was the more important fight to win, and so they focused entirely on Passaran. I think one reason this zone was more important is because they wanted to defeat the strongest army on the opposing side, which was us. And the other reason is that because of our choice to invade Passaran rather than Brockton, if we lost Passaran, then we would not have an entrance into Kingsland. We would have to go into Brockton, a zone that the enemy had taken over, and try to get into Kingsland through Brockton. On the other hand, our allies, 1871, had taken over Batafo, and as you can see here, because they faced very little resistance, they were even preparing to invade this Zone 5. And again, I'm looking over here. I'm I'm seeing the bad news in Passaran, and then I'm coming over here and looking at what 1871 is doing. I'm excited to see their progress. I'm sharing it in Alliance chat to motivate other people. The reason that 1871 was able to get to this pass so quickly is because there was an unplanned server maintenance, and they dropped a fort very close to the pass, and the pass was built while the ROK servers were down. And later on in the KvK, as we're debating rewards and we're debating which kingdom made more of a contribution to the winning effort, I think 871 felt like this was a very badass move they did to get to this pass as quickly as they did. The counter argument to that is that, one, Batafo is not a strategically important zone because all it did was prevent Day Camp from entering Kingsland, but Day Camp was a farming kingdom that really had no impact on the actual war. And number two, it's not as if 871 did a lot of damage to 1682 while they were taking over Batafo. 1682 left the zone to fight us in Passaran. And ultimately, I don't think 871 gave us enough credit for fighting the tip of 1682's spear at the beginning of the war and doing the most damage to the most dangerous team on the opposing side. But ultimately, we did lose Passaran after 5 days, and we needed to find a way to get into Kingsland. And so, in the second half of this drama war, the focus is going to shift to Zone 5 Sakaka and our attempt to get into Zone 6 Shiki. We're going to be blocked by our enemies in Fire Camp, Kingdom 1252, who have already set up forts outside of Shiki, knowing how important it is to keep us from getting in. And look, at the beginning of this KvK, we had the choice to either go west into Shiki and fight 1252, or go south into Passaran and fight a 1 versus 2 against 1682 as well as Water Camp. The decision to go into Passaran was made by our R5, Adinavo, and he sent us in that direction because he wanted to have a challenging, competitive KvK where essentially we gave our opponents a fair shot at winning this thing. Because the reality is, if we had gone into Shiki, we would have had a 2 versus 1 advantage against Fire Camp. And while Fire Camp was a decent kingdom, we were stronger, we would have had an ally with us, and I think we would have inevitably won that war in Shiki. And as a result, we would have blocked Fire Camp from getting into Kingsland from any direction, because they had already lost against 2 of our allies in Zone 5, and so they were also blocked in the other direction from getting into Kingsland. And ultimately for me, I just feel like Addy did make a mistake with this decision, because it was just such a clear paint-by-numbers success story for us if we had gone into Shiki. We would have had a legitimate fight against Fire Camp. We would have comfortably known that we were going to win the whole time, but we still would have gone through a multi-day war due to the fact that this was Fire Camp's last chance, and this was a hugely important zone for them to win, for them to have any chance of winning the Lost Kingdom. And you know, I had some family stuff going on in the week that these decisions were getting made. I do think I would have pushed back on Addy's decision here. I don't know that I would have been listened to, because I'm often not listened to. But, you know, one thing that happened here is that our alliance was just not that active in this war. We were depleted very quickly, and we sort of underperformed in this KvK. And Addy may not have seen that coming, but I kind of did. I'm someone who's active in the off season. This was back in November and early December of 2022. And, I would be online doing barb camps, doing 1+1 forts. I would oftentimes be the R5 in certain time zones. And I would look online and see that there would be time periods where we would have, literally 3 people online in our alliance, and one of them was my alt. And so I just had a feeling that we were less active than we realized. We just had this natural atrophy that occurs where, as time goes on, some of your key players, some of your sort of, not super important but fairly important soldiers, they just stop playing, and you don't really notice it until a war occurs. And that is what happened in the drama war, is that we got into a very tough fight. In the very early days, we had to defend more than we expected. We got depleted very quickly, and once the tip of your spear is depleted, that's when you notice that second layer, it has suddenly gone inactive, and you just don't have any bodies left. But I will say that the seeds of the current day Handsome Devils were planted during this war. So even though we're going to go through hell trying to get into Kingsland, certain things happened during this war that will make 770 the kingdom that it is today. One thing that happened is that the Koreans stepped up and carried us. And it really reflected a significant improvement in the strength of our Korean colleagues. Something else that happened is that we had 2 players, HDT Nation and Holy Holy, who were new recruits and who stood out as very good contributors during this drama war. And after this war ends, HDT and Holy Holy are both going to recruit in groups of 6 to 8 players that they had played with in other kingdoms. As well, the enemies we fought in the drama war, Kingdom 1252, they will also end up migrating and joining the Handsome Devils. And all together now, we are on the verge of our next war. On July 4th, we will be entering Zone 6 in Siege of Orleans and fighting against Cigar King's Kingdom 1818. They're a 6-star kingdom led by a very prominent Vietnamese player. We're also fighting against Kingdom 1903, which is a 4-star alliance. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tune in pretty much right after you watch this video, because I'm going to be live streaming a very long, very competitive war. So there are big things ahead for this channel. I just got approved to be a YouTube partner, so now memberships are open for the channel, and I appreciate all the support that will hopefully come in that direction. I've already got one really good emoji set up, and more of those to come soon. So it's only bigger and better things ahead for the channel. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss any of it. And I will see you very soon on the flip side.